Hello and welcome to ENCORE. Coming up in today's film show, Meals on Wheels, courtesy of one very charismatic chef, Jon Favreau's family comedy with Scarlett Johansson and Robert Downey Jr. We delve into the Hollywood movie machine with new documentary The Go-Go Boys. It tells the story of the two cousins behind the Cannon Film Studios. And it's hiding behind the sofa time, blood, the supernatural and scary remote controls. We have spooky movie suggestions for Halloween. And for all that, I'm joined by our ever-lovely film critic, Lisa Nessleson. Hello, Lisa.
Hello, Eve.
Now, starting with the film Chef, it's an American film that's been renamed #Chef here in France. Tell us more.
It's a family-oriented comedy where writer-director I'm making him French, he has French ancestors, but Jon Favreau works as the chef in a restaurant, and he gets into big trouble because he wants to be true to his food muse, and the boss of the restaurant, who is played by Dustin Hoffman, wants him not to innovate so much. And so he gets into trouble when he doesn't really understand social media, hence the #chef, because he replies to a tweet from a restaurant critic thinking it's private like an email and inadvertently starts a flame war when the only sort of flame he really should be involved with is those little ones you use to make creme brulee. Let's take a look.
By the most important critic in the city.
Now suddenly you're going to be an artist. Well, be an artist on your own time. It's my restaurant.
The kitchen is my domain. That was our deal.
The deal is now changed. Either you stay or you go.
So you're threatening to fire me now?
No, I'm telling you what I'm prepared to do if you don't cook my menu.
Food truck's a great idea. We're talking about a white-on-white 88 Chevy Grumman food truck. It's a blank canvas for your dreams. I'm gonna have him pull it around. Thank you. Don't thank me till you see it.
In that clip, did the film satisfy your film appetite?
Not really. It's absolutely harmless, moderately enjoyable, but I didn't find it particularly interesting. And it sort of conveys a mixed message about whether you should follow your heart and be entrepreneurial or stick with what your boss tells you to do if you're not a character in an idealized sort of movie. I learned yesterday, apropos of saying nasty things on Twitter, that slander or libel on Twitter is called twibble.
Oh, I didn't know that. And you actually have your own hashtag now, haven't you? Lisa Nessleson. Well, anyway, the film is ultimately a film about a man in a food truck, something that's surprisingly very popular here in Paris.
I never thought I would see that. Some years back, I met the woman whose father brought the self-service cafeteria to France because he had worked in New York and thought that was amazing. And everyone said that will never work. French people will never carry their own tray of food and plunk it down at a Formica table. And so I thought the same thing. People wanted a sit-down meal, but food trucks have been very successful here. You're right.
Food trucks are very successful. We're moving on to a documentary now that's about Hollywood in the 70s and 80s. Tell us more.
Well, this is the Go-Go Boys. That stands for Golan and Globus, Israeli cousins who took the film world by storm. They were very successful making small films in Israel, a small country, decided to go to Hollywood, and we owe it to them the careers of people like Jean-Claude Van Damme and Sylvester Stallone, and especially Chuck Norris. And they had a sort of devil-may-care, adventurous spirit and wouldn't take no for an answer. Here's a look at their style.
Meet Israeli duo Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus. They have a dream of taking over Hollywood with their company Cannon Films. And what kind of movies do they make? Some critics call them schlock films.
We thought that it will conquer the world.
You knew there was going to be guns, you knew there was going to be chicks, you knew there was nudity, there was violence. Cannon was synonymous with awesome in the 80s.
They just make hit or miss action movies with the likes of Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Far from it. They actually craved respectability, and because they had the cash flow, they ended up making movies with the likes of John Cassavetes and Gena Rowlands, two very good films with the Russian director Andrei Konchalovsky. And one of the things they're most famous for is that they signed a contract on a paper napkin with none other than Jean-Luc Godard to make his version of King Lear, which he did in fact make.
It sounds very exciting, but it's also a bit of a cautionary tale, isn't it?
Very much so. You know, the first time I got to go to Cannes was in 1987, and you would have thought they owned the city of Cannes because 2 out of every 3 posters were for a Cannon Films film. If you picked up the trade papers, which were this thick, there would be 20 or 30 pages of full-page glossy ads for movies they had made, were trying to make, hoped you'd be interested in. But they overextended themselves. They invested in theaters. They bought movie theaters all over England. They were in some shady business in France. And the money went away almost as quickly as they made it. And they had a very acrimonious falling out. But they were reunited at Cannes for this film just about 2 months before the older gentleman, Mr. Globus, died.
Okay, that's the Go-Go
Sorry,
Boys.
Mr. Golan. No, Mr. Globus is still with us. Sorry.
Okay, the Go-Go Boys out in France now. Okay, we're going to move on to horror films. With Halloween, horror films old and new are out in force this week. Are you a fan of the Scary Movie?
A well-told scary movie, absolutely. I think it harkens back to before we could watch television or movies, we had to stare into the cave, and it was cold and boring, and so people told each other stories. And yeah.
And have you got a favourite horror movie of all time?
I can't remember the name of it, and maybe I'm making this up, but a woman was sequestered with frizzy hair and forced to straighten it.
Oh, is it called France 24's Film Critic or something
yes.
like that? Okay. Well, made for less than €4 million, Ouija is a horror film about young people who use a Ouija board to contact the spirit world. It's topped the North American box office despite having terrible reviews. It's produced by the people behind Paranormal Activity and Insidious, and its success is testament to US moviegoers' appetite for modestly budgeted supernatural fare without big-name stars. Take a look.
As friends we've gathered, hearts are true. Spirits near we call to you. Can you show us a sign?
When you're working with horror, it's a lot of imagination. You know, you're working with suspense, you're working with things that aren't there, but you have to make there. You have to make it appear in your mind, you have to make it appear for the camera.
It's coming through all of us. So who's next?
For me, the best part was actually being scared, because occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally they would actually really scare us. And those real scares really like bring you back into it. It's not even real, okay?
It's just a game.
That is the film Ouija. We're going to stay with the supernatural, the eerie and the downright creepy. Psychological thriller Videodrome is getting a re-release this week. It's 31 years since David Cronenberg's film was first out. Is it showing its age, Lisa?
Well, it's a dead giveaway that it's an older movie by the way people are dressed and the fact that the TV screens are still, you know, sort of boxy and have cathode ray tubes and aren't sleek and flat. But boy, was David Cronenberg ahead of the curve on how we are going to be completely absorbed by the technology around us, quite literally. It's about a guy played by James Woods, who is a sort of pirate video cable guy, and he starts getting these bizarre, inexplicable transmissions only on his TV equipment, which lure him in more and more. Let's take a look.
The television screen is the retina of the mind's eye. Therefore, the television screen is part of the physical structure of the brain. Therefore, whatever appears on the television screen emerges as raw experience for those who watch it. Therefore, television is reality, and reality is less than television. Max, you'll have to learn to live in a very strange new world.
There we go, Lisa. Television is reality. You heard it here.
Who could doubt it?
That might seem creepy, but technology is actually way more creepy now. It's taken over everything.
Well, I think it's fair to say that for most people, their phone is now an extension practically of their flesh. People get very upset and twitchy if you take it away from them. And again, Cronenberg, this has been one of his themes for a long time, this intersection of technology and that sort of thing. Phones have actually become sort of an extension of our brains. And I just flew in from Chicago yesterday, and they tell you to turn off your electronic devices and stow them. And I couldn't help noticing that the people around me were paying no attention whatsoever. The guy across the aisle just kept watching his tablet, turned on his phone before the landing gear hit the runway. So they really, really are invasively part of us now.
You weren't tempted to tell him off. Well, it's certainly the season for vintage horror as Halloween is approaching. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre is being re-released in cinemas in France this week. It's been 40 years since its first release.
And yet I can still remember literally cringing and jumping out of my chair when I saw it in a dark room at film school with two friends with the projector a foot away, so I knew it was only a movie, and I've always been pretty good at telling myself it's only a movie, it's only a movie, but I think because there are no overt musical cues to tell you to be afraid, it's just a creepy concept. These 5 kids end up in a backwoods place in Texas where the family has, well, it's all in the title, you know? I mean, it's in Texas, there's chainsaws, and there's a massacre.
And you think that's what makes it so creepy, that there's no music setting up
I think it's just very artfully told. And also, back then, we weren't inundated with horror movies. There weren't, oh, I'm going to use my camcorder, and oh my goodness, scary monster. It was based in the idea of serial killers. And you know, in America, we have interstate highways, and you can just get off the road and terrible things can happen to you, and no one will know about it.
We'll leave you with that. Thank you, Lisa. We're going to leave you with the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
The most bizarre and brutal series of crimes in America.